Why did she walk like she was hiding pain, yet refusing to slow down? Nobody knew, not yet. The fog rolled in thick over Coronado, swallowing the obstacle course until it looked like a graveyard of shadows and metal. The surf beyond the fence was only a low, distant thunder, drowned out by the buzzing sodium lights and the anticipation that always lived on base before sunrise. It was 4:45 a.m., a time when the world felt unfinished and the only thing awake was discipline. Lieutenant Commander Freya Hald stepped off the transport vehicle like she was placing her feet on uncertain ice. Her boots hit wet asphalt with a sound too light for someone carrying a duffel that heavy. Every movement she made had calculation behind it, not fear, but restraint, as if her body carried a history it refused to advertise. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder, her breath escaping in a white cloud. Her posture was correct, uniform squared, boots polished. But something about the way she held her left side, something subtle, something constant, told a story nobody asked about. A story she wasn't offering. She paused beneath the iron sign, bolted above the entrance. The only easy day was yesterday. Her fingers brushed the spot under her ribs, a brief, unconscious touch. A check, a reassurance, a reminder. Then she exhaled, reset her shoulders, and walked through the gate. From the second-floor window of the admin building, Chief Warrant Officer Bowen Thrace watched her approach over the rim of his coffee mug. He didn't know he was studying someone who already had ghosts trailing behind her. He just saw a woman in uniform moving with careful steps. "That's the new admin liaison," he muttered to the instructor beside him. "Looks like she can barely carry her own bag." The instructor snorted. "Perfect. Another oversight officer sent to write checks on work she's never done." Thrace took another sip of coffee but didn't say more. The judgment was already made. He didn't care enough to revisit it. Below, Freya crossed the grinder, the concrete square where countless careers ended. The fog made it look gentler than it was. The quiet made it seem forgiving. But every instructor on that base knew better, and Freya did too. She walked past the pull-up bars, the rope climbs, the obstacles shaped like wooden monsters waiting to consume the unprepared. Her eyes never lingered. She just kept moving forward, one deliberate step after another, hiding a limp she thought nobody could see. Inside the admin building, fluorescent lights swallowed her the moment she passed through the door. No greetings, no salutes, no acknowledgement at all. She entered the building like a ghost, present but unseen. 2 hours later, the briefing room buzzed with tension. Instructors filled the front rows, evaluating the new roster of candidates like vultures circling a field they already owned. Support officers gathered behind them, sipping coffee that tasted like burnt grit. And in the far back, quiet and unnoticed, sat Freya. Clipboard on her lap, pen unused, back straight, expression unreadable. Rear Admiral Colton Drexler stepped to the front of the room, his uniform immaculate, his medals arranged with the kind of precision that came from a career spent in places where survival wasn't guaranteed. His voice held authority even before he spoke. "We've got 73 reporting for Phase 1 next week," he said. "Largest class in 18 months, more eyes on us, more chances for Washington to interfere." He let the room settle, his gaze sweeping past instructors, officers. And briefly Freya. Just briefly. Not long enough to match her. Not long enough to see what was behind her eyes. "Lieutenant Commander Hald will observe training protocols for the next 8 weeks, Drexler continued. His tone left no room for interpretation. "She's here for administrative oversight only. She is not here to participate. She is not here to advise. She is not here to interfere." A few instructors chuckled, others smirked. Some didn't bother hiding their annoyance. Oversight officers were the least respected species on base, outsiders in uniform. Freya remained still, pen untouched, face neutral. After the briefing, when the room emptied, Only one person hesitated. Lieutenant Commander Enoch Quarry stood near the exit, his weathered face creased with something like recognition. Not certainty, just a flicker of something he couldn't name. He opened his mouth to speak, closed it, then left. Freya exhaled through her nose and pulled a pill bottle from her pocket. 2 tablets, dry swallow, routine, no emotion, just function. When she finally walked out, the room returned to darkness behind her, lights shutting off automatically, leaving only the faint afterglow of the projector screen. At 5:30, the grinder exploded into motion. 73 SEAL candidates stood in formation, trying to look fearless in helmets too green and uniforms too clean. The instructors circled them with the energy of sharks that smelled blood. Thrace stood at the front, voice sharp enough to cut through the fog. 4-mile timed run, he barked. Full kit, you fall below the standard, you run it again at sunset. Candidates adjusted gear, tightened straps, swallowed fear. Freya watched from the side, clipboard in hand, standing near the medical station like a shadow. Her limp pulsed sharper now. Her left side burned in quiet protest, but she stayed where she was, steady on the outside. Admiral Drexler approached. Not quickly, not loudly, just purposefully, hands clasped behind his back, command staff following half a step behind. He scanned the candidates like they were objects on his desk. Then he saw her. Freya stiffened without meaning to. He walked directly toward her, stopping so close she could see every crease on his uniform. Hald, he said, not her rank, just her name. You planning on doing anything today besides watching? Her voice remained steady. Sir, I'm here to document protocol. He cut her off with a scoff. 3 weeks on this base, and I haven't seen you break a sweat. His voice rose enough for nearby candidates to hear. I'm starting to think you don't know what real training looks like. Thrace stepped in, smirking. Maybe she should run with the candidates, sir. Hard to document what you won't experience. The humiliation spread fast. Whispers, snickers, glances. Freya felt the heat of 73 silent judgments pressing against her. She breathed through the pain, physical and otherwise. Drexler crossed his arms. Tell you what, full kit run. You and the men show us if you belong here. Freya looked at the route markers disappearing into the fog. 4 miles. Full kit. Her left side wouldn't make it. Not without consequences, she wasn't willing to trigger. I can't, sir. The grinder went dead quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't happen in training environments unless something goes very, very wrong. Drexler repeated, or whoa. I'm requesting a medical exemption, sir. Laughter rolled across the formation. The kind that stings. The kind that confirms every assumption they already believed. Drexler leaned in. You've been here 3 weeks and haven't seen medical once, so either you're lying. His voice sharpened. Or you're not physically capable of doing the job you're evaluating. Her jaw tightened. Thrace muttered just loud enough for others to hear. At least make up a better excuse, ma'am. Freya's fingers brushed the zipper of her jacket. A reflex. A fear. A choice she didn't want to make. Quarry stepped forward suddenly. Admiral. His voice carried urgency. Stand down, Quarry, Drexler snapped. Quarry froze, but his eyes were on Freya now. He knew. He had known. Freya inhaled. Slow. Shaky. Resolute. Then she reached for her zipper and pulled it down. The sound alone froze the grinder. She took off her coat, lifted the hem of her shirt. And the fog wasn't the only thing that went cold. A scar, jagged, violent, carved from hip to shoulder, cut across her torso like a story told in torn flesh. A wound that didn't come from training, or exercises, or accidents. It came from survival. Real, dirty, impossible survival. The entire base stopped breathing. And for the first time since stepping off the transport vehicle, Freya let them see the truth she'd been carrying. She wasn't weak. She wasn't untested. She wasn't avoiding training. She was alive when she shouldn't be. And that was the only reason she couldn't run. Why did the Admiral take a step back? As if the scar on her body rewrote everything he thought he knew about her. For a moment, the wind stopped moving. Even the fog around the grinder seemed to pause, as if the scar demanded stillness. Freya didn't blink, didn't look away, didn't tremble. She just let them see her. Not the uniform. Not the rank. Not the calm exterior she maintained like armor. Just the truth carved into her skin. The instructors, hardened men who had seen candidates collapse, bleed, break, quit, now stared with something they didn't show often. Unfiltered human shock. The kind born from recognizing a pain deeper than they ever expected. Admiral Drexler's jaw tightened. It wasn't shame. Not yet. Shame requires reflection, and he wasn't that kind of man, not immediately. What he felt first was something closer to disbelief. Who authorized you to show that? He managed. Freya lowered her shirt and slipped back into her coat with slow, deliberate movements. Not hiding the scar, just reclaiming her privacy. You demanded proof, she said softly, so I provided it. There was no bitterness in her voice, no accusation, just a quiet, tired truth. Around them the whispering began again, but different this time. Not mocking, not amused. Stunned. She shouldn't be walking. That wound, that surgical-level damage. How is she even standing? What the hell happened to her? Questions floated around her like debris, but she didn't answer any of them. The story behind that scar belonged to a place none of them had been. A place with dust in the air and grief in the ground. A place that still smelled like gunpowder when she dreamed. Drexler cleared his throat. Held my office now. His voice had changed, strained, less sure of itself. Freya nodded once and followed him, her footsteps softer than the murmurs she left behind. Quarry watched her go, hands on his hips, brows drawn tight. Thrace swallowed hard, the smirk long gone, and the candidates, those who had laughed the loudest, now stood in guilty silence, each one feeling the weight of their earlier judgment. Because pain, real pain, changes the temperature of a room. Freya walked behind the Admiral through the admin building, past the hallway portraits of graduates, and into an office lined with plaques and command flags. Drexler closed the door, but the silence between them stayed open. It stretched like a fault line. Sit, he ordered. She remained standing. He exhaled through his nose. Fine, suit yourself. Then where did it happen? She didn't answer right away, not because she was hiding anything, but because the memory required permission. It was an extraction mission, she said carefully. Civilian evac, classified 2 years ago. That wound wasn't from shrapnel, Hald. No, she whispered, it was. He leaned forward. So, what could you open like that? Her eyes drifted to the wall, to a naval emblem she'd seen 1,000 times. But her mind drifted farther, farther than she wished she could still go. There was a boy, she said, 7 years old, alone in a collapsed structure. I went in after him. Her voice was soft, steady, too steady for the story that followed. When the building shifted, a section of reinforced steel collapsed. It caught me in the side, pinned me, tore through me. She paused. It should have killed me. Drexler swallowed. And the boy? She blinked once, just once. He lived. A simple answer, the kind that hides an ocean of suffering beneath it. And you've been cleared for duty, Drexler asked. Cleared for admin oversight, she corrected. I'm not operational anymore. His gaze hardened. not in judgment this time but in reassessment. The woman he thought was weak wasn't weak at all. She was surviving something no one in that room could comprehend. "So you can't run the 4 miles," he said quietly. "I can," she replied, "but I won't make it past the third, and if the injury tears again, I won't get back up." The silence pressed down. Slowly, the Admiral sat back in his chair. Slowly, he rubbed the bridge of his nose. Slowly, he realized he had humiliated someone who had already survived more than most of his operators ever would. "Why didn't you report the injury when you arrived?" he asked. "I wasn't required to. Admin officers don't undergo physical assessments unless assigned to field support." She looked directly at him. "You assumed I was avoiding training, and I let you." "Why?" he whispered. Her answer came without hesitation. "Because I'm not here for you, sir, or for them. I'm here for the work." Something inside him shifted. Maybe not guilt, maybe not regret, but something close. He stood and walked around the desk, stopping in front of her. For the first time, he spoke without the armor of rank. "You survived a wound that should have killed you. That earns respect, whatever your job title is." She held his gaze. "I'm not here for respect, sir. I'm here because paperwork mistakes get people hurt." It wasn't the answer he expected. It was better. Before he could say more, a sharp knock hit the door. Quarry stepped in without waiting for permission. "Sorry to interrupt, Admiral, but there's something you should see." Drexler frowned. "What now?" "It's about Lieutenant Commander Hald." Quarry's eyes flicked toward her, not disrespect, concern. Freya tensed. "What about me?" Quarry hesitated, just long enough to reveal that whatever he carried wasn't routine. "There's someone downstairs asking for you." Her heart thudded once. Hard. Sharply. "Who?" she asked. Quarry exchanged a look with the Admiral before answering. "A kid." Freya blinked. "A kid?" "Yeah," Quarry said quietly. "Little boy, civilian clothing, says he knows you." A pause. "Says you saved him." The office went dead silent. Drexler stared at her. Quarry stared at her. Freya stared at nothing, because suddenly she wasn't in the office at all. She was back in that collapsed structure. Back in dust and fire. Back under steel and screams. Back where her skin tore open like fabric. Back where she held a boy's trembling hand and told him, lied to him, that everything was going to be okay. Her chest tightened. She swallowed hard. And without a word, she walked out of the Admiral's office. Down the hall. Down the stairs. Through the corridor that smelled faintly of bleach and ocean air. Until she reached the lobby, where a small boy with dark eyes, dusty hair, and a backpack too big for his frame sat on a bench, swinging his feet nervously. He looked up when she approached. Recognition, deep, old, impossible recognition, filled his face. "Hi," he whispered. Freya froze. The world narrowed. The fog, the base, the humiliation, the scar, it all disappeared. There was only him. The boy she saved. The boy she nearly died for. "Eli," she breathed. His eyes filled. "You remember." She knelt slowly, carefully, wincing as her left side pulled. And the boy she rescued wrapped his arms around her without hesitation. She held him back as if anchoring herself to something she didn't realize she'd lost. It was the first real embrace she'd allowed since the wound. And it trembled. Behind them, Drexler and Quarry watched in stunned silence, not a word between them. Because sometimes, the strongest people carry the deepest injuries. And sometimes, the ones who look the most composed are the ones barely holding themselves upright. Freya finally pulled away, brushing Eli's hair gently. "What are you doing here?" The boy sniffed. "Mom said you never visited," she said, maybe you didn't want to see me." Her breath caught sharp, painful. "I wanted to," she whispered. "I just didn't know if I should." "Why?" he asked. And the answer was simple. Brutally simple. "Because I didn't want you to see me like this." Eli squeezed her hand. "I don't care." Her throat tightened. Quarry looked away. Drexler cleared his throat. And somewhere outside, the fog finally began to lift. Why did the boy's voice tremble? As if he wasn't just here to see her, but to bring news she wasn't ready to hear. Freya held Eli's hand gently, steadying him as they stepped outside into the cool morning air. Candidates were still running laps on the far side of the grinder, instructors barking orders in the distance, but none of it touched this moment. Things like that never mattered when ghosts came back in the shape of a child. She crouched beside him, slowly, her side tightening as it always did, and tucked a strand of dust-blonde hair behind his ear. "Does your mother know you're here?" she asked softly. Eli hesitated. His fingers gripped the strap of his oversized backpack. "Kind of," he mumbled. Her eyebrows lifted. "Kind of isn't yes." He swallowed, eyes darting away. She said it was time, that you should know." Freya froze. "Know what?" Before Eli could answer, the lobby doors swung open behind them. Drexler stepped outside with Quarry at his shoulder, neither speaking, neither interrupting. Drexler crossed his arms, not as a commander now, but as someone bracing for impact. Freya turned back to Eli. "Why did you come here, sweetheart?" Eli took a shaky breath. Then another. Then, "The doctors say she's getting worse." Freya's stomach dropped. The bass, the noise, the world blurred. Eli's mother. The widow of a man killed in the same disaster that nearly killed Freya. The woman who had waited at the hospital every night. The woman who had hugged Freya with trembling arms and whispered, "Thank you for saving my son." But after Freya's discharge, she stopped visiting, stopped calling, stopped answering messages. Freya never knew why. Until now. Eli looked up with eyes too old for his age. "She keeps saying it's not your fault," he murmured, "but she cries when she thinks I'm asleep." Freya's throat tightened. "Why would she say that?" "Because," Eli took a deep breath, "because everyone else says it is." Silence slammed into her. Drexler's brows furrowed. Quarry shifted, jaw tightening. Freya's voice barely made it out. "What did they say I did?" Eli's lip trembled. "They say you disobeyed orders, that you went in when they told you not to, that the collapse happened because of you." Freya's blood ran cold. "That's not true," Quarry said immediately from behind her, voice steadier than she expected. "Eli, whoever told you that?" "That's what Mom heard," the boy snapped, his voice cracking. "She didn't believe it at first, but they showed her a report." His eyes darted to Freya. "They said you caused the breach." Freya went still. "Report. Breach. Blame." She had lived with the wound. She had lived with the pain. But she had not lived with that. She swallowed, mind spinning back to the mission, the crumbling structure, the scream of steel tearing open, the moment she lunged for the boy. A breach. Caused by her. No. No, she hadn't. Drexler's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts, low and cold. "Hal'd come with me." But she didn't move. Because Eli was looking at her like someone whose world had tilted. "Did you?" he whispered. "Did you cause it?" The question stabbed deeper than the steel ever had. "No," she said, quiet but fierce. "Eli, look at me. I didn't cause that collapse." "But the report. Reports can be wrong." Her voice shook. "People can be wrong." Quarry stepped closer, gently guiding Eli back as Freya stood, slowly, painfully, and followed Drexler across the grinder and into the operations building. The silence between them felt like a hallway of mirrors, each reflecting a version of the truth she wasn't sure she wanted to see. Inside the command room, Drexler shut the door. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. Freya tried to steady herself. "I don't know why any report would say that. The collapse was caused by structural fatigue." "Are you sure about that?" Her head snapped up. "Yes." Drexler stared at her like he was searching for cracks in her armor. "You disobeyed orders, didn't you?" "I went in before authorization," she said quietly, "because the boy was screaming, because the thermal scan showed a drop in his vitals, because waiting would have killed him." "That's not your call anymore," Drexler growled. Freya looked away. She didn't argue. She never argued about that choice. "Your official incident file says the collapse occurred 34 seconds after you entered the structure," the Admiral continued, packing. "Engineering attributed it to vibrations triggered from inside." Freya's chest constricted. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying something doesn't add up." He stopped in front of her. "Hal, that report wasn't written by anyone at your rank. Whoever filed it had authority. Meaning someone with influence. Someone who needed a scapegoat. Someone who needed the blame off themselves." Freya blinked hard, a familiar nausea rising. "I didn't cause that collapse," she whispered. "If I had, I wouldn't have made it out. Neither would Eli." Drexler studied her, really studied her. Then he nodded once. "I believe you." She exhaled shakily. "But believing you isn't enough," he added. "Not if a child came here thinking his mother is dying with guilt because of you." Freya's breath stilled. "Is she?" Drexler asked. "Is Eli's mother sick?" "Yes," Freya swallowed hard. "Last time I saw her, she was showing early signs of heart failure. I didn't know it had gotten worse." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "This is bigger than I thought." She looked at him. "What do we do?" Drexler hesitated. "Then we find the truth." She met his eyes. "And the report?" "I'll pull the original," he said. "Not the copy civilians were shown." His voice darkened. "If someone falsified it to protect themselves, I'll know." She felt her pulse in the wound. A dull, painful throb. "Admiral," she whispered. "What if it was my team?" Drexler didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because there was one thing she had always feared more than the scar. Not the pain. Not the collapse. Not the memory of her body tearing open. But the idea that someone she trusted, someone she served beside, might have used her survival against her. A knock hit the door. Quarry stepped in, face pale. "Admiral," he said quietly, "you need to see this." Drexler motioned him inside. Quarry placed a tablet on the table and tapped play. A grainy piece of drone footage flickered to life, the collapsed structure, the dust cloud, the rescue team waiting. Freya's breath caught. There she was, running toward the entrance. Then, a flash, a metal shift, a burst of debris. But the collapse didn't start where she stood. It started on the opposite side of the structure, above the rescue team, near the support columns. Freya's eyes widened. She leaned closer. "That's not where I was." "No," Quarry said softly, "it's not." The footage continued, slowing frame by frame, showing the exact moment the building began to fall. And it wasn't from her movement at all. It was from an external shock, something impacting the far wall, something fast. Something shaped like. Freya's stomach turned ice cold. "A projectile," she whispered. Quarry nodded. "Looks like a stray round, high velocity, came from outside the AO." Drexler's face went dark with a fury she rarely saw. Someone blamed you for a collapse caused by friendly fire, he growled. Freya's knees weakened. Not because she was wrong, but because she had carried 2 years of guilt for something she never caused. Something she nearly died for. Something she was blamed for, while the truth was buried. Her voice cracked. Why didn't they tell me? Quarry spoke quietly. Because whoever filed that report didn't want the press release to say a civilian died from our bullet. Freya felt her pulse hammer in her ears. Not guilt. Not shame. Something colder. Betrayal. I need to see Eli, she whispered. Drexler stepped aside, letting her pass. Go, and when you're ready. He held up the tablet. We'll finish this. Freya walked out of the office, slow and unsteady, the truth burning in her chest like a second wound. Because pain has many forms. Some are carved into flesh. Some are written in files. And some are carried in the heart of a woman who thought she was the one who failed. But she hadn't failed. Someone had failed her. Why did Eli look up at her with those wide, frightened eyes? As if he could sense the truth before she even spoke it. Freya stepped out of the operations building and into the courtyard, the world around her feeling sharper, colder. The truth she had seen on that tablet, friendly fire, falsified reports, a child blamed for a mistake that wasn't hers, echoed inside her like a distant explosion still ringing through her bones. Eli sat on the bench where she had left him, clutching the straps of his backpack with small, tense fingers. His legs swung, stopping only when he saw her approach. He stood immediately. Did I do something wrong? He whispered. Her heart twisted. No, no, sweetheart, you did everything right. He didn't smile. Children know when adults lie. And they know when adults are breaking. She sat beside him, careful, slow, her hand instinctively covering her left side. The pain had sharpened again, not the physical wound but the memory of it, the lie of it. Eli leaned in closer, voice small. You look scared. She closed her eyes for a moment. I'm not scared of anything hurting me, she murmured. Then she opened them again. I'm scared of what hurt you. His chin trembled and she reached out, holding his hand. His fingers wrapped around hers tightly, like he was afraid she might disappear. Can I ask you something? He whispered. Of course. Why did you stop visiting after the hospital? The question hit harder than any physical blow. She stared at the ground, letting the truth gather in her lungs like something heavy. I didn't stop because I didn't care, she said quietly. I stopped because your mother asked me to. Eli frowned. But why? Freya breathed in. Because she wanted you to heal, and she knew you looked at me and remembered everything you went through. That wasn't your fault, he said fiercely. I know. Then softer. But she wasn't wrong, Eli. Sometimes, seeing the person who saved you also reminds you of what almost took you. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he didn't wipe it. The wind carried the sound of distant yelling, candidates being pushed through sprints, but it felt like the world wasn't here with them. Is Mom going to die? He asked suddenly. Freya's heart cracked. I don't know, she whispered, but I know she needs you right now, more than ever. Eli nodded, but fear lingered in every line of his small face. And I need you too, he whispered. Freya looked away, swallowing hard. Because part of her, deep buried, terrified, needed him too. Before she could answer, Drexler and Quarry approached from behind, their shadows stretching across the pavement. Quarry's tone softened when he spoke. Eli, we need a moment with Lieutenant Commander Hald, okay? The boy nodded, stepping back toward the bench. Freya stood, squaring herself as Drexler stopped in front of her. There's more, he said. Her pulse jumped. What more? We pulled supplemental files, Quarry said, holding up a folder. Your team's report, radio transcripts, bodycam footage. Freya's breath caught. Bodycam, meaning unfiltered truth. Quarry held her gaze. You were never supposed to see any of this. Her hand tightened around the back of the bench. Show me. They entered a side room adjacent to the lobby, a small briefing chamber with a projector and a metal table. Quarry dimmed the lights. Drexler slid the USB into the console and brought up the first file. Freya braced herself. Then the footage began. A soldier's perspective. Shaky camera. Dust-filled air. A collapsed building rising like a broken skeleton. Her own voice, faint echoing through the comms. I hear him, I'm going in. Then the team leader. Negative howled, we wait for structural assessment. A distant scream. Eli. 7 years old. Buried alive. Freya's recorded voice sharpened. He doesn't have time. She watched herself on the footage, rushing into the breach, slipping through debris without hesitation. She remembered the sting of dust in her lungs, the heat of impact, the weight of fear. But she didn't remember the next part. A second soldier, far off camera, whispered. We shouldn't wait. Orders are orders, the team leader hissed. A beat. Then, a single shot outside. Unexpected. Rogue. Drexler froze the frame. There, he said, impact point. Freya stared at the grainy image. That wasn't her. That wasn't her movement. That wasn't her causing anything. Quarry scrubbed forward. The collapse began on the far wall exactly like the drone footage. The support column snapped, dust rushed inward, the ground thundered, metal screamed. Her body was thrown into a steel beam, tearing her side open. And still, she crawled. She dragged herself forward with one arm toward the sound of Eli's faint cries. Blood pooling behind her. Bones grinding. Vision blurring. Her voice broken but fierce. Stay awake, buddy. Keep talking to me. Freya closed her eyes now, but the screen glowed behind her lids anyway. The footage ended with the rescue team entering the cleared section, pulling both her and Eli out. She was unconscious, barely breathing. Eli was sobbing, clinging to her uniform. The video cut. Silence. Freya stood frozen, breath trembling. Drexler finally spoke. That is what happened, and someone buried it. Quarry added, voice low with controlled anger. They let you carry the blame. They let that woman carry grief that wasn't hers. They let a child believe you caused it. Freya felt something break inside her, quietly, like a bone finally giving under pressure. Someone she trusted. Someone on her team. Someone who filed a false report. Why, she whispered. Drexler didn't soften the truth. Because if command admitted the collapse came from our side, someone high-ranking would have gone down with you. Someone protected. Freya pushed a hand to her forehead. I need air. She stumbled out of the room, down the hallway, and out into the open courtyard. She leaned against the railing overlooking the ocean. The horizon was a silver line beneath the thinning fog. Her lungs tightened. She wasn't crying. Not yet. Not fully. Just breaking quietly, like she had been trained to do. Footsteps approached. Eli stood beside her again, eyes searching her face. You're crying, he whispered. She wiped her cheek. Just a little. Why? She looked at the ocean. Because adults make mistakes, she murmured, and sometimes the wrong people pay for them. Eli leaned his small shoulder against her arm. You didn't do anything wrong. The words hit her harder than the truth, because she had waited 2 years to hear them. Drexler joined them a moment later, standing on her other side. For once, he didn't wear authority, just humanity. "What are you going to do?" he asked her quietly. Freya looked at Eli, then at the ocean, then back at the base behind her. "I'm going to clear the truth," she said softly. "And then I'm going to see his mother." Eli nodded, swallowing tears. Freya placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "But not until I fix what should have been fixed a long time ago." The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of salt and morning sunlight. Quarry walked up behind them, voice steady. "We'll back you all the way." Freya finally breathed, deep, steady, painful. Because truth cuts differently than steel. And some scars don't heal until the truth is spoken aloud. Why did the base feel different now? As if every step she took toward the truth made the ground beneath her more unstable. Freya walked across the grinder with Eli's small hand in hers, heading toward the admin hall, where Drexler and Quarry waited with updated files, transcripts, and the evidence she'd spent 2 years never knowing existed. The morning sun finally cut through the fog, casting long shadows across the blacktop. The candidates were running again, boots hammering out discipline and fear, but the sound felt distant. Freya wasn't here as a liaison anymore. She wasn't here as an observer. She was here as a woman who had been wronged. And she was finally strong enough to confront the truth. Eli tugged at her hand. "Are you mad at them?" She slowed down. "Mad at who?" "The people who said you did it," he murmured, his voice cracking a little. "The people who made Mom cry." Freya knelt beside him, ignoring the throb in her left side. "No," she said softly, "I'm not mad." He frowned. "Why not?" "Because I know what fear makes people do," she whispered. "And I know what guilt makes them believe. Sometimes we point fingers at the person who survived because it's easier than looking at the whole picture." Eli blinked. "That doesn't make it right." "No," she said, "it doesn't." She stood brushing dust from her uniform, and they walked inside. The admin hallway buzzed with quiet tension. Drexler and Quarry were waiting at a long metal table covered with folders so thick they looked like case files for a trial. When Eli entered, Quarry offered him a gentle smile. "You okay, kid?" Eli nodded, but he stayed pressed close to Freya's side. Drexler didn't waste time. "Hal, this is the full chain of command record from your mission." Freya inhaled slowly. "Show me." Quarry opened the first folder. Inside lay the original incident report, older, unedited, stained slightly by time. A signature she recognized immediately was scrawled across the bottom. Her team leader, Captain Rowan Hale. Her chest tightened. He wasn't just a colleague. He was someone she'd trusted. Someone who had visited her in the hospital. Someone who had told her quietly, "You did everything right." She lifted the paper, her hands trembled. Drexler pointed. "Read the first paragraph." She read silently. Then she stopped breathing. Because the words weren't just false. They were deliberate. Cause of collapse linked to rapid internal movement and unauthorized entry. Lieutenant Commander Hal acted outside the scope of direct orders. Structural breach likely triggered from within. A lie. A complete, calculated lie. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Quarry watched her carefully. "It gets worse." He handed her the second file. This one was a signed memo from Hale to command, stating that the structural failure was due to operator-induced vibration and reckless disregard for stability protocol. Freya's jaw clenched. "This isn't what happened," she whispered. "We know," Drexler said firmly. Quarry flipped another page. "This is the engineering report. It contradicts Hale's memo entirely. States the collapse originated on the opposite wall." Freya scanned the document quickly. Her pulse spiked. So he saw the engineering report, she said slowly, and still filed a false statement. Quarry nodded. Because he needed someone else to carry the blame. Freya steadied herself against the table. Why me? Drexler didn't sugarcoat it. Because you survived. Her breath hitched. And because, he continued, you entered without waiting for his authorization. Command does like when subordinates disobey orders, even if it saves lives. If Hale admitted the collapse was caused by a stray round from outside, the media fallout would have jeopardized the entire operation. Someone had to take the fall. Freya stared at the floor. And it was easier to blame the wounded woman who couldn't argue, she said bitterly. Eli pressed closer to her, his small hand gripping her sleeve. Quarry added quietly, "There's more." He tapped a final file. A voice memo. Hale's voice. Freya froze as the playback started. She won't contest it, not with her injuries. She'll take the administrative route. Her stomach twisted. Better one officer's reputation than a full investigation. We seal the file. Move on. Freya closed her eyes. Not because she couldn't listen, but because listening hurt more than any wound she'd ever taken. Drexler shut off the recording. Quarry leaned forward. You were framed, Hald, and we can fix it, but you should decide how far you want to go. Freya opened her eyes slowly. Eli stood on his toes and whispered, You didn't do anything wrong, I told you. Her throat tightened. She looked at Drexler. What are my options? There are 3, he said. He held up a finger. 1, file an official correction, quiet, no names named. He lifted another finger. 2, submit a formal complaint. It will spark an investigation. Hale will face disciplinary action. He lifted a third. 3, request a court-martial review. It will expose everything. The truth, the lies, the negligence, the friendly fire, everyone involved. Freya swallowed. And the consequences. For you, Drexler said softly, all 3 clear your name. A beat. For others, the higher you go, the more painful the fall. Freya turned away, packing slowly. Her side throbbed. Her scar burned, almost as if the flesh remembered the betrayal before her mind fully did. Eli watched her nervously. Quarry spoke from behind her. You don't have to decide now. But Freya did. Because the truth wasn't just hers. It belonged to Eli. To his mother. To every person who lost trust in her because a man with authority wrote fiction and called it fact. She stopped packing. Then turned. Her voice steady. Resolved. A quiet storm. I want the full review. Drexler nodded once. Then we'll move. Quarry immediately began packing the files for submission. Eli finally whispered, What does that mean? Freya knelt in front of him, wincing slightly. It means the truth is coming out, she said gently, and the people who lied have to answer for it. He hesitated. Will they be mad at you? She shook her head softly. No, Eli, they'll be mad at themselves. Just then a faint tremor ran through her body, stress, exhaustion, the weight of what was coming. Quarry noticed it. You okay? Yes, she said quietly, just tired. But Drexler was watching her with a strange expression. Concern, but something else. Respect. Hald, he said softly, you survived a wound that should have killed you. You've carried a burden that wasn't yours. And now you're going to dismantle a lie that was protected by rank and power. He crossed his arms. That takes strength. Freya exhaled slowly. Pain teaches strength, she murmured. Drexler gave a single, approving nod. Quarry handed her the final form to sign. Freya took the pen. Her hand trembled only once. The moment she signed, it felt like something heavy slid off her shoulders, and something heavier took its place. Responsibility, truth, confrontation. Eli looked up at her, suddenly nervous. What happens now? Freya stood, staring out the hallway window at the ocean. Now, things would change. For her, for the boy, for the woman waiting in a hospital somewhere with a broken heart and a story she never deserved. Freya placed a hand on Eli's head. Now, she whispered, we go see your mother. Why did Eli squeeze her hand so tightly? As if he feared she might disappear. Before they reached the truth, waiting on the other side of the hospital doors, Freya guided him through the entrance of Naval Medical Center San Diego, her stride steady but her heart anything but. Hospitals still smelled like ash and antiseptic to her, memories layered too thick to outrun. For 2 years, she had stayed away from this place to protect someone else. Today she walked straight into the fire. Eli stayed glued to her side. His backpack bounced with every step. His silence said what his young voice couldn't. He needed her, and she needed to face a truth she had been avoiding far longer than she'd admit. Drexler and Quarry followed behind them at a respectful distance, providing silent moral cover. Even an Admiral knew when command structure needed to fade for humanity to breathe. Freya stopped at the front desk. Room 4B, the nurse said softly, glancing between Freya and the child. She's awake. Awake. Freya swallowed. She'd rehearsed many things on the way here, 1,000 different ways to apologize, explain, unravel, but none of them survived the moment she stepped into the hallway and saw the door. It was half open. Light spilled out. Heartbeats echoed in her ears. Eli reached the room first, pushing the door open with small fingers. Mom! The woman on the hospital bed turned slowly, and Freya's breath left her. Lena Prescott. Thinner, paler, eyes tired but still warm. The woman had once radiated a kind of gentle resilience that made entire rooms soften. Now she just looked breakable. Eli ran to her side, burying his face against her arm. She smiled weakly, closing her eyes as she held him close. Freya stayed in the doorway, unable to move. Her fingers curled against the frame until her knuckles whitened. Lena opened her eyes again, slowly, carefully. When she saw Freya, something inside her flickered. Recognition. Pain. Memory. Freya, she breathed. It wasn't accusation. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper, something wounded. Freya stepped inside. The air felt thin. I didn't know you were this sick, she whispered. Lena smiled faintly. You weren't supposed to. Eli looked between them, confusion clouding his small features. Freya approached the bedside slowly, each step heavier than the last. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice trembled. If I had known. Lena lifted a weak hand. None of this is your fault. Freya's throat closed. But she had to say it. She had to speak the words that had been buried under lies and silence. I didn't cause the collapse. Lena didn't react with surprise. She reacted with relief. A long, shaky breath left her body, as though she'd been holding it for 2 years straight. I knew, she whispered. I didn't want to believe what they said, but when the reports came, when the officers insisted, when they said you ran in too fast. Her voice broke. I wanted to trust you, I did, but I was scared, and it is so easy to blame the living. Freya sat on the edge of the bed, her own eyes burning. You don't owe me forgiveness, she murmured. I don't need to forgive you, Lena said softly, because you didn't do anything wrong. The words struck Freya with a force she was not prepared for. Her breath hitched. She lowered her forehead to the woman's hand, letting the truth settle into the cracks that betrayal left behind. Eli watched quietly, clutching his mother's arm, understanding far more than a child should ever have to. Drexler and Quarry stayed in the hallway, letting the moment unfold without intrusion. They saw enough through the small window in the door to know this wasn't a debrief. This was healing. Lena touched Freya's hair gently. "You saved my son," she whispered, "and I'm sorry you carried pain that was never yours." Freya shook her head. "I carried the scar. The pain belonged to all of us." Lena let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "You always said things like that, making everything sound meaningful." Freya looked up, eyes wet. "I don't feel meaningful, Lena. I feel guilty." "You shouldn't." "But I do." Lena studied her for a long moment. "Why? Because you lived." Her voice softened. "I wanted you to live. God, Freya, what would Eli have done if you did?" Eli rested his head on Freya's arm. "I didn't want her to die," he whispered. The simplicity of the statement gutted her. She stroked his hair with trembling fingers. "You're the reason I didn't," she whispered. Lena's eyes glistened. "The report, the lies, they almost made me resent the one person who saved my child. I'm ashamed of that." Freya shook her head fiercely. "No, don't you dare be ashamed." She took Lena's hand. "You were grieving, you were scared, you were hurting, and you were lied to by people wearing uniforms that should have protected you." Lena closed her eyes. "Then expose them." Freya stiffened. "What?" Lena opened her eyes again, sharp, determined, the strongest Freya had seen her since before the collapse. "Tell the world the truth," she said. "Not for me, not for you." She touched Eli's cheek. "For him." Eli blinked up at her. "You want her to," he whispered. "Yes," Lena whispered, "because my son is not growing up thinking the woman who saved him caused his father's death." The room went still. Freya felt something inside her shift, subtle, powerful, irreversible. Resolve. Quiet. Steady. Final. She nodded slowly. "Then we expose everything." Lena gave her a tired but genuine smile. "Good." There was a long silence, the kind that blankets a room when truth finally fills the air. Eli climbed onto the bed, curling gently against his mother's side. She wrapped an arm around him, exhausted but at peace. Freya stood, brushing his hair softly. "I'll be back tomorrow," she whispered. Lena nodded. "Bring flowers, something bright." Freya smiled faintly. "I will." She turned to leave, her steps slow but lighter than when she arrived. At the door she paused, looking back one last time. Lena lay with Eli curled beside her, the morning sun painting warmth across them both. A picture of pain and healing intertwined. Freya stepped into the hallway. Drexler straightened. "You ready?" Freya nodded. Quarry handed her the full case file. "Once we submit this," he said, "there's no going back." She took it. Her hand didn't tremble this time. "Good," she said quietly. "I have nothing left to fear." Outside, the sky had cleared completely, blue stretching endlessly over the base, the ocean, the city, her past. Freya inhaled deeply. Not to steady herself. Not to hide anything. Just to breathe. A simple human thing she had forgotten she was allowed to do. As they walked back toward the car, Quarry glanced at her. "You okay?" Freya nodded. "Yeah," she said softly. "For the first time in a long time, I think I am." Drexler gave her a rare, quiet smile. "Pain doesn't diminish you, Hald. It reveals you." Freya looked at the horizon. "Sometimes," she whispered, "dignity doesn't speak." Her eyes softened. "It simply acts." And she walked forward. Toward truth, toward healing, toward whatever came next. With the steady, unbroken stride of a woman, who finally carried only what belonged to her.